Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is So You're About to Graduate College with a special edition. We're talking about gender today from every perspective and how we can all do better, which is very exciting. Dave Hall is back after a brief hiatus. Welcome, Dave Hall.
Yes.
Where have you been? You've been growing your hair out.
Yes. No, I've just been shampooing, lots of conditioning, too busy with my hair to join you guys. So.
No, fair enough. Well, for those of you that are watching, go ahead and shout out where you're watching from, who you are. Looks like Kyle's ready to buckle up. Thanks for coming while watching, Kyle. Appreciate the support. Share amongst social media. Help us get the word out. We appreciate that. This episode will live on the internet forever, most likely, as long as YouTube is around, which is exciting. So we do have a couple special announcements before we dive into the topic. We have a new member of the team that is joining today, Emily. Welcoming. Emily, hello. Come on down. How are you doing?
Come on down. Hi, everyone. Doing well. How's it going?
So for those of good. For those that don't know you, why don't you I'm putting you on the spot here. We didn't talk about this, but why don't you tell us a little about yourself? What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing for your life? All that good stuff.
For my life. Absolutely. So yeah, thank you for having me on the team. I'm super excited to join. I've actually been watching the show since its conception, since its start this summer, because I am a recent graduate. So the show is exactly aimed for me and what I want to do. I would love to work and grow in the themed entertainment industry. So definitely been interested in the show since its start. I recently graduated from Ryerson University up in Toronto. I got a master's in digital media up there. Before that, though, I did work in the theme parks, and that's really where my passion grew, and I knew that I wanted to work within this industry. I worked in Walt Disney World in multiple roles, as you do. I started.
Oh. She frozen?
You need that technical difficulties banner. Well, I'll finish completing her discussion. No. Well, Emily, we're happy to have you, and hopefully your connection will come back. We'll pull you off just for now until maybe you have to log out and come back in. My internet's been a little sketchy. I'm in Canada right now, so I was a little bit worried that was my connection, but it seems like it was. Emily, you're back. Hello. Welcome back.
Hi, sorry, it was my connection. My Wi-Fi has been so spotty recently. Super apologize for that. Not sure where I left off, but I'll just keep going with what I was rambling about. But yeah, so I worked in the theme parks. I knew I wanted to grow within the industry off of operations. So I went back to school at Ryerson, got my master's in digital media, and that year in that program really was just an amazing year and opened.
Oh my god.
I feel like I'm the only one with normal internet until my internet messes up and I'm like, oh no, it was me, because we all have this.
Well, we have this on staff. Is that
Yeah, you took the good internet, Kelly. Okay, I'll keep this short just in case this keeps happening. But anyway, so graduated. I'm back in Orlando now, still looking for work. I'm freelancing a bit. I'm a graphic designer by trade, but really interested in a lot of different things within the industry and seeing where I fit. Interested in project management, interactive design, diversity and inclusion is definitely one of my passions that has.
There we go. It's almost reliably the same amount of time in between breaks.
I hope every time my Wi-Fi cuts out, you're not hearing me go, oh my God. Like every time I see the little thing like go blank. Anyway, that's me. If you want to get to know me better, shoot me an email, shoot me a comment, and we can talk. But really, really happy to be here. The Patrick Klingerverse brought me here to this show. I finally get to work with Dave Hall, who I am associated with through Patrick. Kelly Bailey is amazing. Rachel's amazing. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Sorry about my internet.
I need to get T-shirts that say Patrick Klingerverse. That's Chris Bradley. So this the way this event kind of started was we were watching Wendy Heimann-Nunes' TEA Service Award recipient. And Kelly was texting me, Cynthia was texting me saying, we need to talk about this, all about gender on a different platform. And here we are a few weeks later. Wendy's, so let's go ahead and bring everybody on. Reception is better when, what is?
Patrick wears a hat.
I did my hair, Chuck, just for you. So I like a little more presentable. It's an important topic. So let's go ahead and bring on Wendy and Cynthia Sharpe, Nunes and Cynthia Sharpe. Hey, everybody.
Hey. Hello. We're off the races this morning, aren't we?
Yeah, the connections are not great, but it's okay. You know what? This is what happens. This is just the world we live in. So we're happy to have everybody here. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the live stream. Once again, we appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in. Go ahead and share the show if you can with your friends and family or your coworkers. We appreciate that. But let's dive in. So for those that don't know Cynthia Sharpe, can you give us a little bit of a bio of yourself? And hello, welcome. Good morning.
Hi. Hi, I'm Cynthia Sharpe. I'm Principal Cultural Attractions at Thinkwell Group, and in my copious free time, I'm co-founder of Harriet B's Daughters, a group dedicated to increasing diversity, inclusion, equity, and access in themed entertainment. My route to themed entertainment was kind of circuitous. Born in Arizona, lived there for 8 years, lived in Florida for 5 years, but not Orlando. I lived on the East Coast in a relatively small town, and then moved up to the northern suburbs of Chicago for high school. And this is sort of where Wendy's and my lives sort of converge as a Venn diagram, which is only a circle. We know each other's high schools and stuff like that. I was the gunner that you love to hate in high school. I was the straight A high flyer, list of activities a mile long, but I was dissuaded. I was a really strong writer, and I did theater, and I was literally not allowed by my high school to pursue theater as a class. I couldn't do additional coursework after my freshman year because it would bring down my GPA, and they were worried about me getting into the highest caliber possible college. So I didn't get to pursue creative writing electives or further theater electives or art or music electives, and was pushed instead, because I was a girl who was good at science and math, was pushed along this STEM track. And then I went to Williams College for undergrad thinking I'm going to major in bio. Science is what I'm good at. Science is what I'm destined to do. And Williams is a liberal arts college with a very, very, very heavy emphasis on having a broad array of coursework and lots of writing. And I was like 1 or 2 classes shy of actually finishing a double major, biology, which I did do, with a specialization in molecular genetics, and then religion with a dual specialization in feminist liberation theology and modern Judaic thought. And all of those things combined together are completely unemployable. I headed off to graduate school to do a PhD in molecular genetics, in the genetics of complex human disease at the University of Chicago. And within 2 years, realized there were 20 people in the world, grand total, who understood the question I was asking and how I was pursuing the answer, the scientific theory and techniques behind that. And that isn't what I love about science. I think science is a great lens through which to view the world and tackle some really big intractable problems that we have as a society. And that pursuing the PhD path was not going to allow me to share that love and share that passion. So I left graduate school. It was like the first really big failure of my life. And conveniently, the largest science museum in the Western Hemisphere is in exactly the same neighborhood as the University of Chicago. And I got a job at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and thought I was going to be a museum person as a career, like for the rest of my life. My then partner, now husband, finished up his PhD, did his postdoc, and he got a tenure track job in Kansas City. And so we had to move. And I went freelance for about 1.5 years and then joined Thinkwell's core team. And I've been with them ever since. I've been part of Thinkwell's core team for 16.5 years at this point. And Thinkwell at that time, at the time I joined, was really small. So you couldn't do just one thing. And so instead of just focusing on museums and other cultural attractions, I started working on theme park projects and events, and it really expanded my horizons. And suddenly I had a career path where, particularly on the museum side of things, I could combine my love of and passion for science and informal education with creative writing. And as a kid, I had no idea that this was out there as a career path. But also, at the time I started in the field, there were no female creative directors who were widely known that I could look up to. On the museum side of things, most of the women in C-suite positions were like vice presidents or chief education officers or marketing. You didn't see women, you didn't see gender fluid or non-binary CEOs of museums or executive directors of museums. It was a very male-dominated world. And so I bring to it the perspective of having lived through some pretty significant sea changes in terms of gender equity making inroads in the C-suite. Not equal, like we're not there yet, but I've seen some really big changes in various verticals of the themed entertainment and location-based entertainment industries over the course of my career. Full disclosure, I'm a white woman, so I cannot speak from a place of knowledge for the challenges that gender nonconforming folks have faced in going up the career path, or a Black woman has faced in going up the career path. And I try at all times to be very mindful of that privilege and approach things from an intersectional viewpoint, and realize the tools and techniques that I've been able to utilize may not work for somebody else because of the pushback they're going to receive because of their intersectional identities. That's who I am.
Yay!
And not to forget the Blue Loop 50 museum influencers of 2020.
we can say that here. Congratulations, Cynthia. Congratulations on the honor, and welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, of course. Next up, we have a fresh face, Wendy Heimann-Nunes. Welcome to the show. Now, all I can think is I'm going to mess your name up now that I put that in the air, so
That's
I apologize.
Okay. You wouldn't be the first one to do that, so no problem.
Well, fresh off the TEA Service Award, and I think I got that right, Service Award from the Theas. Welcome to the show. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Tell us about, for those that don't know you?
Sure. So I am from Chicago. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, and ever since I can remember my consciousness, I loved creating. I loved bringing things to life. And so I knew pretty much my whole life that I wanted to be pursuing a life in which I was going to be building things and making things and creating. I loved the arts, and I thought when I was younger I had a modicum of creative talent. And then I went to Northwestern undergrad, and I met people that had legitimate creative talent. And I realized at Northwestern that that was not something I should pursue as a career. And I really had to figure out, what did I want to do? I wanted to try to merge my interest in creativity with what I viewed as some of the things that were my skills, basically thinking critically, thinking strategically, and being a good advocate and being a good communicator. I was a communications major, and I took a class that really set me on the course to be in themed entertainment, whether I realized it or not. And it was called The Rhetoric of Contemporary Culture. And we studied rhetoric, but in a modern way, dissecting various things from a 360-degree perspective. So we looked at businesses, we looked at television shows. I studied the Northwestern athletic department, and we broke it into its various persuasive components. And that's when I really woke up to the fact that I could be a part of something where we were persuading people immersively. And it was before anyone even knew what immersive was. And that really fascinated me just from an intellectual and a creative perspective. And so it was also at the advent of themed dining in Chicago. The Let Us Entertain You company started creating, it seems so old now and it's so common, but at the time, themed dining was special. It was reserved for places like Disney and Clifton's and things like that. And the Let Us Entertain You company started really proliferating these types of experiences, and that really woke me up to, again, that immersive kind of experience that you could provide people. I finished Northwestern. I became a talent agent in Chicago, and really doing what I could to be in entertainment in Chicago. And it was as a talent agent that I realized that I had some intellectual bandwidth that wasn't being actualized. I always looked younger than my age. I was a woman. I was frequently sold short as a result. And so I wanted to do something to build up my arsenal that I could bring to the world. And this is where Cynthia and my worlds collide. I went to University of Chicago Law School. But Cynthia, so I had a little experience. I brought a prop. So for me at University of Chicago, I was like Elle Woods in Legally Blonde. I was a complete fish out of water. I wasn't taken at all seriously when I first arrived on campus because there were people like Cynthia who were rigorous intellects with multiple degrees, with a serious, there's my husband, we share an office, multiple degrees. And there I was, University of Chicago, wanted to pursue entertainment law. And it was a real lesson when I was there of really fighting to stay true to myself and not allow my own insecurities to get the best of me and change me. And by the time I finished law school, I loved it there. The Cynthias of the world, we were supportive of them and proud of who they were. But then the Cynthias happened to be proud of whack jobs like me. And it was a really nice environment. I left University of Chicago and practiced intellectual property law at a law firm in Chicago because I didn't plan on practicing law very long, but I wanted to season my education. And it was there that I got very involved in the theater community in Chicago. As I mentioned, I've always loved the arts and entertainment. And I served on, I was on the first board of the Looking Glass Theater Company, which is now one of the country's most prominent regional theater companies. I was there when we were stuffing envelopes in a basement. And I kind of became known in Chicago as the attorney that was the theater person. And so when the Chicago Theater needed an executive director as a landmark 3,600-seat theater on State Street in Chicago, they were looking for some reason for an attorney. I don't know why. They felt that because the theater had been through bankruptcy reorganization, they needed an attorney. But they kind of came to me, and I was insanely young for such an amazing position, but I got it and I took it. And it was there that I realized that entertainment and real estate could be merged to really help build communities. At the time, the mayor wanted to rebuild the North Loop, and he saw the theater, resurrecting the theater, the landmark theaters, as an opportunity. Disney had just acquired the Palace Theater in Times Square. So Disney was interested in real estate development in Chicago. And that's when I woke up to mixed use real estate development. I met some folks at Disney Development Corp. I met Michael Ovitz, had the pleasure to actually interact with him, and had the pleasure of learning about Disney and their earring size and the fact that we had to wear pantyhose and this and that. And I told my theater folks, we're not going to listen to the Disney people. They can give us their manual, but we're not going to follow. So to the Disney people out there, sorry, couldn't deal with the facial hair and the earring requirement limitation in the theater world. So, but it was really great working with Disney. And so when I moved out to LA, I knew I wanted to pursue something in mixed-use real estate development with an entertainment overlay. And of course, where does that land me but theme parks? So my first job in LA was as general counsel of the infamous Oz Entertainment Company, which another Cynthia tie-in was. We were building a theme park based on the Wizard of Oz in Kansas. And then I left, never happened, but it was fun. And I learned a lot. And then I left to head up business and legal affairs at Universal Creative. Met the most creative, amazing, futuristic thinking people. Got really excited about the future of immersive technology and the opportunities I thought were going to open up in creating new business opportunities and new business models outside of just traditional theme parks. I saw between consumer appetites wanting more experiences and the emerging technologies, the availability, the affordability, and then the fact that traditional entertainment attorneys weren't paying attention, and I saw an opportunity to do something on my own and focus on location-based and immersive law entertainment. And so that's what I've been doing now for 14 years, and built a firm, now have a firm of 13 attorneys who practice all different areas, mostly surrounding though any endeavor, any company, any individual who's focused on intellectual property, whether it's hard assets like technology or softer assets like creative assets. And I've just loved my career path, and it's definitely been a career path that's been focused on really trying to stay true to myself and making decisions career-wise that enabled me to do that. Despite the fact there was so much external pressure in various ways to be something different. But for some reason, I'm just not wired to be anything other than who I am. And so I was fortunate that I stayed true to that and was able to still make my way. So that's my story.
Muted. Well, welcome. That was great. Lovely introductions. Welcome you too. So I'm going to kind of just say a few things to get started. And that is, we've all agreed that this topic, we could probably talk about it for 10 hours straight. We're not going to do that. So we will be doing, we're going to do multiple series on this, bringing different voices and all that. So we're not going to pressure ourselves of trying to solve the world's problems in regards to gender today. But it's a start, right? It all starts with discussions and open and honest discussions. And to borrow some things that Free and Cynthia have said in the past is that, or people have said, is that this kind of stuff is messy. We're going to bump into each other. We're going to say the wrong things. And it's okay to do that. And everybody has a different tolerance level or a threshold level. And so, we're here just to have an open conversation about it. In the chat, we'd love to have everybody contribute your thoughts. Please feel free to ask questions. We have an outline of the things that we want to talk about. But if you have a topic you specifically want to throw to this powerful group of people to talk about, we'd love to do that. The first and most important thing is that, and we've had discussions about this, is how, gender equality affects both. Hold on, there's not just one gender. It affects everybody, right? Thanks, Cynthia. Affects everybody. So, we know that we have people that are white males on this call. We have women on this call. We have everything in between that could be watching. And I'd love to just open that up about why it's important for us to not think of it as, roll our eyes, it's the feminists doing something again, and they're the social justice warriors. Like, this affects everybody. Cynthia or Wendy, would you want to comment on that and better than I just did?
I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Cynthia.
Okay. So something interesting to note about how both Wendy and I introduced ourselves. Neither of us went into detail about the fact that we built these career paths and blazed these trails while also being moms, and the journey that we went through there. And the thing which made me go the most during Wendy's TEA interview for the Peter Chernak was yet again when a woman was receiving an award in the industry, there was the comment of, and doing this all while being a mother to 2 beautiful children kind of thing. And when men have been interviewed for these kinds of awards, it's been the note of, and you had the support of your loving wife and kids, as if he was not an active parent as well. And that shit's toxic. Let's just put that out there right now.
Not to get political, but there's someone that's working to bring our husbands back to work, Cynthia.
I know, and I'm so excited for that.
Aren't you though?
As a suburban woman,
he needs to get back to work.
Yeah,
I want to just say, Cynthia, like that, I messaged you in that conference, and that's what spurred this discussion. I said, why do they do that? Or I don't remember my exact words. But now I have this lens on of like, why do we have to bring that up?
Do you want to know something funny though? It wasn't until you guys brought that up when we were talking about preparing for the show that I even thought about that. I'm so used to it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't even occur to me that there was a gender bias or difference in that introduction. But okay, so I'm going to defend my friend Monty for a second.
Absolutely.
I think that what that also demonstrates, though, is not just that we think of female professionals as, accomplishing things despite the fact that they're mothers, but I do think that I still think it's the case that our systems are not equipped to help women actualize their full potential as professional humans, while at the same time recognizing that women still bear the brunt of responsibility for children. And I'm afraid my husband's going to want to chime in and disagree with this stuff as he's listening to this, but it's just the way it is. It's still the baseline expectation is that we are going to be the ones, if the child's sick, to leave the office or go, things like that. So, on the one hand, it's problematic to reference that in a woman's career when you're describing her. On the other hand, we can't forget that we still live in a world where the burden does fall on us, and that's part of some of the things we have to repair as we try to reach more gender equity, is creating systems that help women, number one, in that regard, and number two, permit men more latitude to take that part, and feel good about it, and not feel socially, that's not appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that's the other side of the coin. There is that the burden all falls on the women, and the men don't have, in some cases, the same ability to take on some of that burden because they don't feel either it's social. They don't feel like they are allowed to leave their work to go take care of some of these issues, or they're not even given the time to leave work, like in regards to paternity leave, anything like that. They are not encouraged to be that kind of parent, even though most of them probably want to.
Yeah, and it goes beyond parenting. When my husband got a whopping 2 days off when our kid was born, and they were emailing him and calling him going, "Are you going to be in to teach your class on Wednesday?" Even though they had ample warning. But later, several years later, when he had a family member who was gravely ill, he got pushback from folks in his department. He was in a very, very traditional academic situation. And until he got tenure, he did not have a lot of latitude or leeway to push back on the culture, the processes, the structures that were there. He did not have the support to go tend to a direct relative who was ill, and in fact had someone who was in a position of power above him, who pretty much held his future career path in his hands, say, well, can't your wife just go take care of somebody who is a direct relative of my husband? So it's not just about parenting. It's about being a human, being a fully actualized human with a life.
And that people who identify as male can have feelings.
Yeah.
You know, they're expecting him to go back to work despite all of this going on in his personal life, which can take a toll on us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a theory, a little evolutionary theory. It's absolutely unscientific, but it's my personal theory. And that is, I think we're moving, if you think about, humankind and our systems and how they were developed for survival. So, there was a reason that women had a certain place, men had a certain place. It was just necessary for survival. And then you get into, the kind of the corporatizing of the country and the type of person that companies needed. Let's say, for example, in order to be productive, they needed someone focused and not thinking too critically and staying in their lane. And that was the way for success. We needed people like that in order to manufacture and produce goods and whatnot. And I just have this feeling that as we move into a world or an economy when innovation and creativity are really that much more critical to success as opposed to just productivity, that affording people the opportunity to just be who they are is actually a benefit to the organization. It creates an environment where they're able to be more creative and express something more special to themselves, and that will inherently force companies and organizations and systems to change the way they handle their HR, thereby freeing people up to be more who they are. And so I think we're seeing it in the pandemic, working remotely. I think companies are seeing how productive people are and how by being able to just live their lives and do what they need to do. And so I think that in a way, some of this gender evolution tracks, I don't know, it's the chicken and egg thing, tracks some of the organizational evolution of at the end of the day, what systems need in order to be the most successful. So I think women are going to be given more opportunity to be who they are. Men are going to be given more opportunity just in general, because I think it creates a better innovative environment. That's my theory.
I kind of wonder, so when we talk about gender, we're kind of in an interesting place. We're talking about, the history of time. Is where society kind of helps shape gender, and where the chicken or the egg, where is somebody's gender being defined by society versus what they actually want to do. And that's a big topic that's a little bit of, it's a huge topic, right? Humongous. So yeah, I'm setting aside that and what shapes gender identity and social norms and all that. I will say that, that we know that there are pressures that men face that women don't necessarily face, being the breadwinner. When Trump says, I'm going to get your jobs back or whatever it is. And there's more that are out there. And I'm not complaining about them. I'm just saying that there are there are pressures on men and there are pressures on women. And then what we can do to try to transform the industry or talk about that is, okay, how do we set aside what we think our coworkers should be doing, because we really don't know what their family unit structure is or how they are. And I think it's about not pushing that on them as a company or as an industry and saying, great, how do we support you in whatever situation you need? Just like if a family unit is having a baby, no matter what the gender is or who it is, how much support they need. What do they need to do that? Our industry is also pretty unique, where we have a lot of people that are freelancers or project-based, where taking time off means you're not even getting paid, or do you have a gig when you come back, right? There's a lot of unique, interesting things that face our industry. So Does anybody have any, before we move on to the next topic, does anybody have any other thoughts around how gender will affect everybody? I'm sure we'll kind of dive into more about that too.
I just wanted to say something. I'm feeling like an old lady when I talk to you guys. And I just wanted to put some perspective on things. When I was in law school, it was when Anita Hill was testifying regarding Clarence Thomas. And that was really, I think, a watershed moment in when people started waking up to some of these, you know, systemic kind of, at that time it was sexism and whatnot. And I just think that part of what we're experiencing now is just a natural byproduct of the adulting of our society. We are growing up and we are infinitely more mature and adult than, for example, our society was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So to the younger people out there, I know it must feel like a very strange time because we're confronting so many of these tough issues and we're doing it so publicly. But just know it's a really great sign that everyone wants to grow up on this, and the world is infinitely better in that regard than it was years ago. So I just want to say that to people. Yeah,
particularly for the viewers who are younger than we are, it's important to know how significantly the landscape has changed during my lifetime, or like the year before I was born. It wasn't until well after I was born that I could go to Harvard, because Harvard didn't admit women. It was just before I was born that I could, like, that it would be legal for a woman to get a credit card. Actually, no, it was after I was born for it to be legal for a woman to get a credit card strictly in her own name. It wasn't until I was in kindergarten that I had legal protections, that a woman would have legal protections, that she wouldn't get fired for being pregnant. Many states, at the year of my birth, I couldn't serve on a jury. A woman couldn't serve on the jury, couldn't fight on the front lines for the military, couldn't sue a workplace for sexual harassment. It wasn't until I was a junior in college that it became, that spousal rape became a legal thing. I would not have had the right to say no to my husband legally. The landscape for women has absolutely tremendously transformed in the past 5 decades. And it's hard to imagine what the world was like in the early to mid 70s. My mom got her first pair of jeans the day after she got married. Because dad gave her permission to wear jeans.
I think that what we're witnessing is just the unpacking of all this, right? So when you think about what happened with Harvey Weinstein, look, we know this was endemic to the entertainment industry. Harvey just happened to be one of the real bad ones and got busted, and some brave women finally said something. But this has been going on all over the place. And so I think that's what's happening now is it's like we're unpacking things that always existed, and we're now getting into the granular aspect of it. So I want everyone to feel really hopeful and in every way.
Yeah. Well, and you just touched on something, Wendy, which is to say, pretending it doesn't exist doesn't really help in any way. And that's what it feels like we got into a place where things were okay. Yeah. Everyone looks like they have their rights, and now we're maybe on the fringe elements and we're on here and there. But these things affect people dramatically in their day-to-day life. And just because people, 50 years ago thought it made sense doesn't mean it makes sense now in any way, shape, or form. Especially now, when I hear the word traditionally family values, I just my head explodes. Cynthia, do you want to talk about discussing gender biases versus pretending they don't exist? Where do you stand on this?
You know, I think gender bias is totally awesome, and I have no problems whatsoever with that. No. We're in, because of the industry we're in.
Cynthia, I don't want anyone to get rid of Ladies' Night.
Ladies' Night is awesome.
Like the free drinks.
We're in a unique position because of our industry, because not only do we have our workplaces that we deal with, but the stuff we make, we're putting it out in front of millions of eyeballs, and it moves the cultural barometer. So we wield incredible potential power in shaping public opinion. And so it's important that we acknowledge bias and seek to root it out, not just in our workplaces, but also in our work products. And genuinely, I don't just mean the art that we make and the narratives that we write. When we're deciding how to allocate people out into the field, we have to acknowledge, different cultures have different views on gender, and it affects people differently. And we need to, from an HR perspective and a staffing perspective, empower our people to have honest conversations about what they will need out in the field in order to feel respected, supported, able to do their jobs. We need to, our leaders in our companies, when they get comments from clients about, man, that female producer, she's a real ball buster and a bitch, let the client know that's not okay. She is the producer. She is expected to be in command, and I expect her to have strong opinions and back them up. She's doing exactly what we want to do, and I will not tolerate my employee being called those things. Flip side, we need to support men in our industry as well. We need to support gender fluid and non-binary folks in our industry, particularly on the museum side. That is a toxic freaking place for folks who do not land within canonical gender expression, because not only are they dealing with it in the workplace, they're also dealing with the erasure of identity in our collections, in our exhibits. Think of the number of times that you have seen a woman described as, she dressed like a man and she went by a man's name, and you're sitting there going, you're so close to getting it right. And erasing their gender identity, their sexual identity. So museums are an absolutely toxic place for people who do not conform to the gender binary or who do not identify as straight, because so many of our collections and interpretation are strictly heteronormative, strictly gender binary, and that is bad for mental health. We have to acknowledge that there is bias in our workplaces, in our work products, and seek to root it out.
That brings up a question that I kind of have, and something that I struggle with, is in the erasure aspect of it. We kind of have that fine line to walk between, sometimes that difference that people have is so highlighted that it becomes the thing that people know them for rather than their actual accomplishments. So where do we walk the line between, so instead of describing that person as, a woman who dresses like a man and goes by a man's name, if we just called them a man, which we should, they were, but do we highlight the fact that they were then, born as, with female sex parts, or do we, highlight their accomplishments and leave that in the background? And where is that? Do we know where that line is? Is it a case-by-case basis? Probably, but.
So that's a great question. If you're not following Margaret Middleton on Twitter, you need to be. I will, when I'm not talking, I will look up her handle and paste it in the chat so that somebody can elevate it. She is a museum consultant, and she digs really, really deep into precisely this issue and issues of inclusion around language. Her flyer on family inclusive language which gets us away from a traditional mom, dad, two-parent household language and museum label copy, is brilliant, and everybody should read it, love it, hug it, name it George. She digs into this a lot, and she does a great job as well pre-corona, as they're traveling around, highlighting exhibits that do it well, doing really critical reads of new exhibits that are tackling that very issue. There was, I want to say it was at Smithsonian National Museum of American History. They did, if you've been to NMAH since they've redone their lobby spaces, there are these really big cases that they swap shows in and out of in the ground floor and the main floor lobbies. And they did an exhibition on queer history in some of those cases. So it wasn't like in one of the big exhibition halls. And that exhibition, as I recall, did a really good job of talking about how someone's identity had been erased or reported, and that was an important part of their story. But also, here were their amazing accomplishments. Mm-hmm. So there's a level of acknowledge the erasure, because the erasure is part of the story, and is a key part of being honest about what their life must have been like. But then also it's but this is the amazing thing they did, or this is why they're widely known, so that it's all contextualized.
I have,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I have a question for you guys. You know, I've been self-employed for now, like I said, almost 15 years. And my organization, my firm, we I don't know, maybe we run it so unorthodox, but what is it about the environments in which you guys work that make you feel that you can't just be who you are? That what is it that goes on in your organizations that make you feel like either a man or a woman or you know, a cis male, you know, why is that a conscious thing at this point when you're at work or when you're doing your stuff? What are some of the things that go on that make it so that it's a conscious thing? It just surprises me that this is still an issue in 2020. I have to be honest with you.
So I think where we're at is we're at the unconscious biases and the systemic barriers that are not really it's not necessarily, no one's going around in a normal office setting and saying, "Hey Toots, how you doing?" Right? The cartoonish ridiculous thing. But you might have I've been in a weird spot. Not a weird spot. I have had been surrounded by women who have been my bosses my entire career, direct reporting. The majority of it, I've been surrounded by very powerful and enchanting and great women. However, this expands it. They perceive a barrier of getting up higher in an organization, and that's across several different companies. It's not just one person. They felt like, okay, if I was a man, I probably would have been elevated a lot more. And I've had conversations with people at various organizations that feel that way, that they feel like they get to a level, or that their creative ideas are not taken, or that depending on which company where they've gone into and pitched a discussion, they're told, "Hey, keep quiet unless somebody else says, no, I want to hear their idea." And so that's things that I've heard and I've witnessed. I happen to work for a company that's very inclusive in a lot of ways, and they're really great people. However, we still see we start to get to intersectionality of where, okay, what people are in positions of power in the different companies. And
do you see that changing? Do you see the people in power becoming more diverse, or do you feel like it's stagnating or not? Because I think our industry, and I hear what you're saying, and it resonates with me based on observation. Our industry has to be very conscious and deliberate about promoting diversity in the ranks of power, period. Otherwise, this isn't going to change, because the implicit bias, we all live with implicit bias. It's very difficult to be conscious 24/7 of our own biases. And so, one of the ways to help eradicate that is just by having much better diversity at the top ranks. And my observation in our industry is that we've been slow to that.
Yeah.
And so, that I think we all have to put pressures on various organizations to say it's time. You cannot have an environment like this anymore.
Yeah. Well, and to add to that too, kind of going back to your question, Wendy, I think for a lot of young people who are just starting in the industry, they hear these things and like we're aware of implicit biases and things that go on in the office, but sometimes it's hard to bring it up because either you're new to a job, you don't want to step on anyone's toes, you want to keep the job essentially. So I don't know, I have kind of a question on the tail end of that as well, as like, how do we encourage leadership to be advocates for, just a healthy work environment, speaking up for people that maybe can't for themselves, different things like that, because I think it does trickle down from leadership, creating that space for people to feel comfortable and safe within their work, essentially.
I mean, I think that comes a lot with the power dynamic that goes on in the office. People who come in who don't feel comfortable bringing that up because they don't feel like they have the power or the safety. A lot of it has to do with relationships as well. Like if you don't have a good enough relationship with your manager or your coworkers to be able to voice those opinions without repercussions, it's an issue. So I don't know what the exact answer is and how to get more managers to be open to that and support that. But I think that's where we need to go.
Well, and this is kind of a good topic to discuss that we can kind of naturally segue into, which is to say, Cynthia mentioned an issue with maybe you have a client. And we're such a collaborative industry that, okay, you might have internal meetings and you can fix the culture, or let's say you can work on your culture at your company. Let's say you're in a partner meeting and you have a developer in the room, you have a creative firm in the room, you have an IP holder in the room, you have an owner operator, technical specs, vendors, all in a room. And, depending on the different disciplines, that may skew one direction. It's, we all know kind of where that direction is going to be. And a comment is made that's unacceptable. And, what are some takeaways or guidance, Cynthia and Wendy or whoever, about how to be confident enough to speak your mind? Like that's a challenge, especially if maybe you're getting paid to be there and you're a vendor yourself. Any tips and recommendations on that?
I can take this first from the sort of like, what is it like in the creative room side of things. I have been in a situation where I have watched, heard, witnessed a client be absolutely disrespectful to a woman in the room. She wasn't the only woman in the room. I was there too. And there was another woman. She was the only woman of color. And she is in a discipline which is traditionally white and male. And the client was an absolute asshole to her. And she handled it the first time. She tried to redirect and firmly reasserted her position and the reasoning behind it. And the second time he did it, the partner owner of the company who was in the room as well cut in and made it very clear that her logic was sound. She was one of the most experienced people we had in this particular area of expertise. He had complete confidence in her and her abilities. If she said X was a problem, it was a problem. And the client needed to respect her acumen or they were going to put the project at risk. And it was a client, we were finishing up a phase and we wanted that next contract. It's how our industry works. But the partner owner was not going to let it slide once. He let the employee in question try and redirect and handle on her own And then he made no bones about it, which was really great. It was firm, it was polite, it was in the moment. And it was important in that space that it be in the moment, because I could watch the younger employees and the other women in the room deflate and shrink back and not have as much ownership over their areas of the project and their areas of expertise under this guy's withering sexist attack. Sexist and racist, let's be honest, attack. Another situation, I was in a room with another consultant team, and we were preparing to pitch to a client. The head of that consultant team really threw us under the bus to his team, and it was completely inappropriate. However, because of the nature of physically where we were at and who was in the room, it would have been inappropriate for me to get up in his face at that moment in time. So I firmly stated our position, redirected, and at the next break, I physically hauled him out of the room and out of the building so that nobody could overhear, and let him know in no uncertain terms that if he ever treated my team, or for that matter, his team, if I ever heard him throw the women on his team under the bus the way that he was attacking the women on my team, that I was going to trigger the clause. And Wendy, you have spoken about these kinds of clauses in contracts. I was going to trigger the clause about sexual harassment and abusive behavior, and we were going to take it to legal.
So thanks, Cynthia, for sharing that. I have another question.
Real quick, if you don't mind. It's in those situations, the people who spoke up and rightly spoke up were more in the position of power to speak up about that. You know, they were the ones that could talk the way they did to those people. Do we have any recommendations for people who are maybe newer to the company, or another of those associates who are going to shrink back, like you mentioned? How are they supposed to handle that kind of situation if there isn't somebody stepping up for them or their coworkers?
One of the things I wanted to mention is, and it seems so basic, but I wanted to underscore it. The first thing that everyone really needs to feel and own is their own personal power to actually advocate for themselves. I think one of the things that I witness with people in positions that are not necessarily as powerful is that they've adopted for themselves this narrative that they're in a position that lacks power. And I think the thing that everyone should really lay claim to is their personal power to advocate for themselves. It doesn't matter what level you're at, and it's scary. And I think a lot of our behavior in organizational environments is driven by fear. And what I would really encourage everyone to do is try to move beyond fear and really just recognize, you know, the power of advocating for yourself. And then the question is, once you've owned it and you recognize you have the right and the wherewithal to advocate for yourself, even if you're perceive yourself not in that leverage position or position of power, then I would say find someone in your organization that you trust, that has, you know, more of the power you perceive you need, and talk to them and tell them how you feel and tell them that it's unacceptable and that you want them to do something about it. I experience it as an attorney all the time. My clients, you know, sometimes they get into these mindsets where they don't feel like they're empowered to push back because they need a job or they want a job or they're afraid of pushing the counterpart away, and there's so much at stake. And I will tell you with certainty that the more I watch people advocate for themselves on every level, the more respect they actually get in return. And so don't let fear drive you into assuming that you don't have power. It's really powerful. And so I don't know, I sound like a cheerleader, but don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, and then find a person that you feel you can trust, but advocate for yourself, talk to them and tell them it's unacceptable what happened and that you want them to help you deal with it.
No, absolutely. And I think you brought this up before, that whole aspect of like, this is still your space, even if the two people interacting are not directly nothing is directly relating to you. Like, this is still your space. And if somebody makes you feel uncomfortable in the way they are treating other people in your space, you have the right and you have the ability, I'm trying to think of the right word, you have the agency to step in and speak up, that they are, not, they're making you uncomfortable as well.
Right.
Like,
you're entitled to live life and not feel uncomfortable.
mm-hmm.
That, and I really believe it's not what you say, but it's how you say it. I think sometimes, there's the art of communicating tough subjects in a way that doesn't seem offensive and whatnot. And I think the more earnest and the more sincere and the more understanding you can be when you talk to people about your concerns, the easier it is to digest on the other side.
So to that extent, this is an area where it's important to not fall into the trap of placation, particularly if you are a woman who has been acculturated to tend to the feelings of men, to de-escalate situations, and to just try and make it all okay. If you've been raised to be Wendy and Peter Pan, if you've been raised to be the den mom, if that's what society has taught you how you need to behave, that can really get in the way of doing precisely what Wendy and Dave are talking about. Not only do you have the agency, but if a situation's uncomfortable because someone said something sexist or racist or homophobic or anti-Muslim or what have you, guess what? You're not the one who's made the situation uncomfortable. They are. They are the ones who have brought this into the playing field. And for many of us, we have been raised to, for lack of a better term, keep sweet, not make waves, let it ride. Do the compliment sandwich to take the sting off of it. To Wendy's point, though, be sincere and be direct. You know what? That's not appropriate. She's a trained professional. She really knows this stuff, and you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't listen to her. You know what? He's proud to be a new dad. Don't give him crap about his wife should be the one getting up with the baby. Wouldn't you be proud? Wouldn't you be happy to have a new kid too? You don't need to couch it. You don't need to smash it in the middle of the compliment sandwich, which a lot of us were taught how to do. But guess what? The compliment sandwich dulls the impact of the critique to the point that people can just sort of not give the critique the weight that it needs. It mutes and dulls the impact of your point. So in these situations, don't do it. And remember, you're not the one who introduced the discomfort into the situation. They are.
Yeah, I will say that I would, for myself, I would slightly modify what Cynthia is saying. Is I definitely agree. You shouldn't need to own the discomfort. You need to transfer the discomfort to the person who created it, right? Mm-hmm. The modification in my mind that I would just add is believing that their intentions were pure. I think sometimes when we get into these situations, we assume the worst in people. We assume that they meant to be sexist, they meant to be disrespectful, they meant to be obnoxious or whatever it is. And a lot of times they just don't even get it, and they're well-intentioned. And so for me personally, I usually assume the best. I advocate for myself, but I assume that it's just that they didn't get it or they didn't understand, and that now I'm explaining it to them or whatever, they're going to now get it. And I think one of the things that I worry about on the part of white straight men, is that there's so much fear of creating discomfort and saying something they shouldn't, that it creates a natural intrusion on a normal relationship you'd have in the workplace with a person who's either gay or of a different color, or a woman and whatnot. And that has its problems too. And so what I'd hate to see is if people advocated for themselves in a way that made the other person feel less than as well, because then it creates this dynamic of, I think we all just have to recognize we're in this together. We're in this primordial stew of learning about these things and becoming more sensitive together. And so we can directly advocate, and as Cynthia said, be firm and clear. But I also think if you imbue that with a little dose of empathy for the fact that the person may just be clueless, I think it helps a little bit. It helps the dynamic instead of it feeling so antagonistic.
Yeah, and not to mention that if the ultimate goal is to get everyone on the same page and understanding how to behave properly and to get rid of some of these biases, the best way to do that is not by attacking somebody or having someone be on the defensive. So as much as you need to stand up for yourself, I mean, you can't put them as the enemy. You have to definitely
Exactly.
a empathetic teaching perspective so that they know how to not step in it next time.
Unless they're just complete jerks, in which case all bets are off, right?
In which case, yeah. But like I had a case once where a female colleague who I absolutely adore, super aware of these issues, rolled into a room, looked at who was in the room for this meeting and said, "Hey, ladies." And I knew that one of the people in the room, although their name is female and they were assigned female at birth, not necessarily their gender identity. So in the moment, I said, "Who are you calling a lady? Have you met me?" And diffused it that way. And then after the meeting, followed up with the one employee was like, "Are you okay? What pronouns do you want me to use for you? You and I have never been on a team before." And this person was like, "Good catch. I'm they, them. Thank you, because it makes me uncomfortable every time somebody does the 'hey, ladies' or what have you." And then I followed up with the PM in that situation, because they were like, "What was with that?" afterwards, because we're good friends. I'm like, just because the name, and it was a real moment for her. So it was that, in the moment, I didn't need to go in swinging, but afterwards, I needed to have the conversation to make sure the one employee was supported and felt safe, to Dave's point, and knew you are permitted to speak up in that situation. You absolutely have the right to speak up in that situation. If nobody's doing it for you, you don't need to sit there in silence and discomforts. But also letting the PM know you need to be aware of this and don't do that again.
Yeah, I found that being an ally and using humor is always good, and then also like bringing the attention onto yourself instead of calling it out and being like, "Hey, this person," like, no, don't, but instead of just making a joke about you, like, usually helps a lot for the situation.
I think it's good too to have this discussion of how to bring these things up and how we can call things out, so to say. But I think, Cynthia, you brought up a good point of also people need to understand how to receive this type of feedback as well. Like, very similar with how Patrick introduced the show, is like, we are going to make mistakes and we're going to sit in it. I think people on the receiving end have to understand that as well, and understand that, we are all learning. Things come from empathetic ways, and sometimes you just have to sit in your poop, so to speak. So
I have a question for the group. So we've come from a place where and I think this is probably going to be the rest of what we'll talk about. I know we have like 8 other things we want to talk about, but I think this is a great topic. Is Wendy was touching on the fact that we don't want to create or if we create an environment where men don't even want to talk to women, that's a problem. However, we're transitioning an industry from maybe a locker room talk to hey, there's a lot of other topics you can talk about when you're at work that don't need to relate to that kind of stuff. Great. And they're inclusive and everyone can talk about whatever they want to talk about, which is fantastic. We're getting to like things that are a little harder to define. So we can define a sexist or an overt sexist uncomfortable moment. We all have that lens on. Do you have any advice of trying to figure out the things that are a little more under-rooted? You feel like you're consistently getting different feedback than your male counterparts. You feel like you're not advocating yourself and getting a raise when you feel like you should. And the people can point to 5 other reasons of no, there's this thing over here, and you feel like a crazy person because it's not something that's so like clear, but you feel it in your heart that something's going on. Otherwise known as gaslighting. What do you?
I'm going to say something radical, and I want to preface my statement by saying that I know the job market's tough, and it's very scary. You need to put a roof over your head. But sometimes you have to recognize that the environment that you're in is a losing proposition. If you feel that you're not getting raises the way your male counterparts are, that you're not getting promoted the way your male counterparts are, I don't know that there's that much you can do to change that environment other than to recognize that you're not going to actualize your full potential in that environment, and they don't deserve you, and that you need to bring your talent elsewhere. I know that sounds fatalistic and whatnot, but I think there's only so much you can do. And if you're really confronting those types of issues, those are systemic and they should not become an hindrance to your success. You need to move on and find a place that takes you for who you are and promotes you for who you are. It's a little radical, but.
100%. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The issues, the twin issues of imposter syndrome and the sunk cost fallacy are absolutely deadly.
Correct.
The whole I don't nobody else will hire me. This is the only place they will see through me and I won't make it and I won't get hired at this other place. The data is out there that a man can look, and this is highly gender binary oriented. The research did not look at gender fluid or gender non-conforming or non-binary. I apologize. But men will look at a job description on a job posting and go, yeah, I got 60 to 70% of that. I'm going to put in for it. Women need to see closer to, I tick 100% of those boxes that they're asking for before they'll apply for a job. Apply for the job. Even if you look at it, you're like, I got 2/3 of that. Apply for it. Just do it. The listing on a job description is like and I want a pony and a unicorn that shoots rainbow sprinkles out of its horn level of wish list for an employer. So you might as well go for it and put in for it. And if nothing else, they might have you in mind for the next thing because you've gone through the interview gauntlet or you've gone through the resume or portfolio review gauntlet. But also the sunk cost fallacy. I've spent so long here. I've got this project that I want to see through. I can make it work. It's like, no, I've spent 4 years in a bad relationship. If I can just get them to change X, it will be better. No. The notion of you should stay because of the amount of time, effort, money, what have you, that you've sunk into something, that's toxic. And you need to just figure out, sometimes you just have to cut bait. The fish, you're not going to land the fish. Now, if you're in a situation where you have advocated for yourself in the past and it has worked, advocate for yourself again. You cannot and should not expect wonderful things to just magically land on your plate. You have to self-advocate. I have asked for major title changes and promotions a number of times at ThinkWell. They haven't come to fruition quickly necessarily, The last big one, that was like a 1.5 year long conversation of, I am getting headhunted for executive director and senior vice president positions at museums. It's not what I want to do right now with my life. I don't want to uproot my family. I don't want to be forced to wear a suit and heels at work. That's a whole different discussion. But I don't know what my career path here is at ThinkWell. Where do I have to go from here? What does the path forward look like? That was a really long conversation, and my hat is off to the partner owners of ThinkWell who meaningfully engaged in it with me. And I am a principal as a result of those conversations and that work. That wasn't magically going to happen and get handed to me on a plate. I had to advocate. I had to own my swagger. I had to show them my worth, remind them of how I had been an asset to the company in the past and how I was poised to be a major asset in future, and ask them for it and advocate for myself. It had paid off previously. I was confident it was going to pay off again, but I also had sort of a, if they don't do X by Y date, I need to seriously consider what my next move is. And my next move may well not be at ThinkWell long term. So it's a combination of, getting over imposter syndrome, not falling prey to sunk cost fallacy, and advocating for yourself. And if self-advocacy doesn't work, then realize, as Wendy said, you got to go.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to personal relationships, right? If you believe that you're a person worthy of love and respect, you don't stay in relationships that continually don't provide you love and respect. And I think, I don't know why it would be different in the workplace. And self-advocacy is critical in all of this. Belief in yourself. I agree with you, Cynthia. The fear of fraud is particularly a female-driven thing. Work on that. Believe in yourself. Advocate for yourself. And then, say to yourself, if you're not, after certain attempts, being received in the way that you deserve to be received, you're going to find another organization that's going to do that.
I do want to touch on that imposter syndrome a little bit as well, especially as a woman of color as well, because a lot of times there's a lot of intersectionality with diversity and inclusion. And I think,
Oh no.
No.
Oh.
Oh no.
We can Mad Lib what we think she was going to say.
no, sorry.
There we go.
Every time I talk, my Wi-Fi just says, nope, shut up. Again, don't know where I left off, but I don't know. We've seen a lot of performative activism this year is really what I was trying to say. So like as a woman of color, when we're put into these positions, a lot of the times we fall into that imposter syndrome because of performative activism. We're like, are we here because we are a diversity hire? Are we here because they really want us? Or are we just an optic, leverage? Mm-hmm. So that imposter syndrome is just so hard, and it's easier said than done to get over it. But I totally agree that it is something that we have to harness our power. Again, like Wendy, you said earlier, that, we are here for a reason. And even if we were a diversity hire, let's prove them that we deserve to be here. And this is, we are powerful, I guess.
I have a thought about that, and then we should take Ariel's comment. So I think you should think that everybody else that came before you was a diversity hire, but in the wrong direction. Okay, all the white males are getting hired or whatever it is, and now we're just equaling it out. And I've had a lot of conversations with Cynthia about just tokenism, right, and putting people on the air or doing this for just that reason, right? Well, that's not what we want to do, and that's what we want people to be at. Out in the industry and public, and that's a whole other topic for another time, but just it's okay to have visibility, and visibility is very important. And you bring a very unique perspective to the table that I find valuable, that we are lacking in our rooms right now, depending on what creative room it is. That's a very valuable, for me, it's I'm very progressive on this, but I think it's we need that experience that you have, whether or not you want to call it diversity hire or not. It brings so much more value, and you're more valuable than the line of people that are clones. And Cynthia has a lot of stories about that as well.
But at the same time, we need to make sure that we are not bringing people into an environment and a system which is toxic to them. There's a saying in academia, if you hire a good person into a broken department, you don't fix the department, you break the person. And we need to not do that. So we're going to, like, we are already seeing in the museum world, we've seen some really high profile resignations by Black women who had achieved like a curator position at a major art museum kind of thing. Social media manager for the Met Museum, Kimberly Rose Drew, stepped down a couple of years ago after she had increased their social media presence subscribers by millions of people. We're seeing this because they're refusing to be tokenized. They're like, this is a toxic situation. I'm not being paid equally to my white male predecessor, who, by the way, was a huge ally and told me how much they were getting paid, which, enormous. I refuse to be a token hire and be their, look, Black Lives Matter face, when the system and the structure, everything else they have going on, devalues and dehumanizes me. And props to the women who have done that. We have a lot of work to do on our systems and places and processes and structures to not be inherently cruel to the folks who are now, it's like, oh, I can't be all white. I need to hire me. I need to front some. That's not treating your colleague, your employee, as a person. That's treating them as a widget. And we have to fix that.
I would say one thing, assuming that you're not in a toxic environment and you can thrive as a person who is of color or whatnot, just know that and this is coming from an old lady, people don't hire willy-nilly. You know, you only have so many positions, you only have so much money to spend on people. You need to be successful. You're running a business, you're heading an organization. You make decisions based on who you think is going to help you be successful. So even if you think you were given a position because you are a person of color or a woman or whatnot, just know that that decision was not made lightly. They chose you because they believe you will help them be successful. Don't allow that inner narrative to overtake you of this fear of fraud just because you're a person of color. I'm telling you, organizations don't make stupid decisions. They make decisions based on what they think is going to help them be successful. And by hiring you, they're validating you as a decision that they think is going to make them successful. They brought you there for a reason beyond what you are. So a lot of this is an inner dialogue too, that we have to get muscle memory out of, and just train yourself when you start feeling those feelings or thinking those thoughts, the feedback loop. Nope, I'm here. I deserve to be here. It's hard, but it's just a feedback loop you have to create for yourself consciously.
That's great, Wendy. Well, I'd love to kind of round out the show by throwing up Ariel's. She had a situation, and maybe we can have a quick discussion about this. And like I said, we scratched the surface on this, so we'll be doing more dialogue. I recently had an interview for a studio with attached shop and was warned by the interviewer that they're typical construction workers and I shouldn't be offended by their indelicate language. P.S. Male roommate interviewed for the same position, no such warning. Who would like to crack this one open? And I really appreciate you sharing that publicly. That's really, and I know you have another story as well, but maybe just the closing thoughts on that.
So, I can't believe this is still happening, because when I interviewed, they would say it's a male industry. Are you good working with men, or that kind of thing? And it's like, oh my God. But this is where it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, I feel like, because we are now becoming more sensitive to people's sensitivities, language, whatnot. And so on the one hand, I appreciate the interviewer saying that, right? Because they are perceiving you as a woman. They are acknowledging we live in a climate where things can be said that could be taken offensively. And so in a way, they're articulating a part of them that's sensitive to what could be your needs as a woman. On the other hand, the double-edged sword is they're identifying you as a woman who might be sensitive to comments like that. And it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation. And I don't know that there's a good answer.
I actually would not have had a problem with them giving that warning. I probably would have phrased it a little differently if they had given it to both you and your male roommate, because then it would have been a heads up. This shop is still in the old days a little bit, and they tolerate this language, even though, and obviously I don't know where the shop is, and having just gone through the oh so fun California compliance sexual harassment training and watched video after video on this kind of thing, knowing that I could complain to HR about that kind of language, getting a warning from a recruiter or an interviewer of this is the kind of environment it is, regardless of my gender, that I actually would have been okay with, because that would have been a heads up to me about what kind of workspace this is, what kind of work environment it is, what they tolerate. But the fact that they only gave it to you as a woman, that it was only perceived as a problem for you, that's where I'm like, about this.
The issue I have with it, and I think it comes kind of in the warning, and it really depends on how the warning is phrased. But if they say to you, these people are like this, be careful. That's nice that they're warning you that they're like this, but then my response is, okay, what are you doing to change that? Like,
yep,
like they cannot give you that warning and say this is how it is, and yep. I'm okay with that, because they are giving a pass to those people to continue to behave in that way.
Absolutely,
and that is not okay.
Absolutely. I view it as they're waving red flags at me if I'm interviewing of this is what is permissible here.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite. I kind of wonder. My favorite part is that they told her that she shouldn't be offended by it.
Yeah.
Like
don't tell me what I'm offended by.
Right.
I'll be the judge of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, Dave. Like, maybe this brings it back to Wendy's earlier comment of is this a culture or a company that you will want to be in? Because again, they're waving those red flags. Like, acknowledging is one thing, but are you actually doing something about it? Are you actually taking active steps to make this a better place, even though they're typical, whatever Ariel said? But
it's that's one thing that's weird to me is it's indelicate language. We live in working environments where sometimes indelicate language is used. So what does that really mean?
I'm married to a New Yorker. My dinner table is full of indelicate language.
Yeah, what are we talking? Are we talking about racist, sexist? What does that really mean? And that's like providing a cover for them, Well, let's end on a high note. Cynthia, Cynthia and then Wendy, we'd love to hear just any closing thoughts. We will bring you all back. We will tie you up and bring you back, bring you in. Because like you said, we have so many different stories that we talked about even on our prep meeting that we didn't get to. So Cynthia, what say you for a nice closing thought?
Oh, why did you have to throw to me first? This is a journey, and it is fractious and contentious, and you can be paralyzed by fear about saying the wrong thing or making a situation uncomfortable. But I find hope in two things. Number one, the volume of these kinds of conversations that are now happening publicly, that we're having at conferences, that we're having on broadcasts like this, that I am seeing a much broader range of folks engage meaningfully in these conversations, and that's great. And I have seen tremendous change happen in my little sphere of work over the past 2 decades, not to mention on a societal level, current events perhaps notwithstanding, but I have seen tremendous change, and I am hopeful that, particularly as we are increasingly aware of race issues, of gender issues, of LGBTQIA, of anti-religion, anti-Muslim, anti-Semitism, what have you, I am increasingly hopeful that more people and more companies can take the economic crisis of now as an opportunity to not just get back to business as usual when things resume, but really take a long, hard look at where is the system broken? What can we do to fix it? Do we need to tear it down entirely and start anew? Are there processes that we can improve? And looking at what's going on right now is a real inflection point for potentially really leaping forward in defanging some of these issues and making our workspaces and what we create way more equitable than they would have been had we just kept plugging along doing things like we usually did, like we used to do. So that's where my big hope is.
That's great. Thanks, Cynthia. Inspiring as always. Wendy, let's see if you can be inspiring her.
Sure. So I'm going to take it at a more, actually, do you guys mind pulling me off the single shot? It's hard for me to talk to myself. There you go. Thank you. It's hard for me to talk to myself like this. So I'm going to take it at a more micro personal level because I agree with everything that Cynthia said. I think the most important thing everyone can do as young professionals is, number one, love yourself. This sounds very hippy-dippy, but really love and respect yourself and advocate for yourself and believe that you're worthy of that advocacy. Try not to live in so much fear. And then also be kind and empathetic to those on the other side and recognize that or try to understand that it's possible they're stepping into dog poop without them realizing it themselves, and that they didn't intend to step into dog poop. They just also are becoming more conscious or need to become more conscious, and help them on their road to being more conscious. And, I just think if we all recognize our own power and then honor other people's intentions in the process, that we will all kind of rise together, as opposed to creating adversarial situations. That's the one thing I worry about all this, is that we are creating adversarial situations needlessly, and so navigating these dynamics is difficult. So I would just urge everyone: love yourself, believe in yourself, advocate for yourself, but also recognize that other people have their own weaknesses as well, and their intentions are not always bad, but just misguided, and help them grow as well. So it's more touchy-feely micro than Cynthia's, but I really believe that.
No. Well, thank you for joining us on the show. We'll be back. For those, make sure you like and subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. We'll be back in a few weeks, so stay tuned for more episodes. Thanks for all the people that watched. This episode is going to live on on YouTube and on Facebook. So we do get a lot. Actually, the majority of people watch the show on replay. So please share it with your friends, family, colleagues, anybody. We appreciate all of you that came out to support. Have a great day, everybody. Happy Halloween. Vote. And apparently now you can't even mail things in. You have to drop it off. I don't know. Just do what you can to get that vote in.
Drop it off.
Drop it off. Take it. Look up your local election office.
Drop it off. All right.
It's too late to mail it. Drop it off.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys.